Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, please rise for the arrival of the Right Honourable Christopher Luxon, Prime Minister of New Zealand, and Prime Minister Lawrence Wong. Distinguished guests, please be seated. The Right Honourable Christopher Luxon and Prime Minister Lawrence Wong will now witness the signing of the Agreement on Trade in Essential Supplies. May I invite the Honourable Todd McClay, Minister for Trade and Investment of New Zealand, and Dr. Tan See Ling, Minister in charge of Energy, Science and Technology of the Republic of Singapore, to sign the agreement. The signatories will now exchange the documents. We would like to invite the signatories to face the camera for photos, please. Please look at the camera. Thank you, Excellencies. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of the signing ceremony. The joint press conference will now commence. May I now invite Prime Minister Lawrence Wong to deliver his remarks, please.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister Christopher Luxen, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, once again, a very warm welcome to Prime Minister Luxen and his delegation to Singapore. I still remember fondly my visit to Auckland last October, and I'm very happy to be able to return the hospitality this time. Since our last meeting, the world has become much more unsettled. The conflict in the Middle East is disrupting energy markets and supply chains. And countries like ours, small, open, and trade-dependent, feel these shocks more directly. And that's why this visit is so important. Singapore and New Zealand share many strategic perspectives. We have long seen the world in similar ways. We believe in openness and cooperation. And over the years, we have built a deep reservoir of trust. And we don't just speak about principles, we act on them. And that's how we help pioneer agreements like the Trans-Pacific Strategic Economic Partnership, or P4, which laid the foundations for the CPTPP. We launched the world's first plurilateral digital economy partnership agreement, and more recently, the Green Economy Partnership Agreement. So each time, we have broken new ground. We don't just wait for consensus to happen. Our two countries are prepared to move ahead first. We don't just follow the rules, although we do. We are always the ones who follow the rules. But we proactively work together to shape new rules at the same time. And today we are taking another step forward. We have just signed a new agreement on supply chain resilience, the agreement on trade in essential supplies. This is the first agreement of its kind for both our countries and also globally. And it marks another breakthrough and sends a very clear signal. Even under strain, trusted partners will keep faith with one another. And it means that even in times of crisis or shortages, we will keep essential goods flowing, food, fuel, and other critical supplies. We will not shut each other out, and instead we will work actively to keep trade moving. This matters because in difficult times, every country will be tempted to look inward. But when that happens, supply chains break down, and everyone ends up worse off. So this agreement is our answer. It's a commitment that we will do things differently, that we will keep markets open, keep essential goods flowing, and stand by one another, especially when it matters most. This agreement is part of our broader Comprehensive Strategic Partnership, or CSP. And this morning, Prime Minister Luxen and I discussed how we are taking our cooperation forward under the CSP. First, we welcome the Singapore-New Zealand Leadership Forum, which is happening today. It brings together senior business leaders from both sides, and both Prime Minister Luxen and I encourage the CEOs to build new partnerships and seize opportunities in our region. Second, we continue to deepen our defense and security ties. Singapore values New Zealand's long-standing support for the Singapore Armed Forces training in Waiuru, and we will likewise continue to support the New Zealand Defence Forces access in and through Singapore. We are also working together in newer areas, including in unmanned technologies. These will benefit the professional development of both our armed forces. Third, we are strengthening cooperation in critical areas like healthcare and food supply. We are sharing lessons from COVID-19 to be more prepared for future pandemics, and we are making it easier and more efficient to trade food and primary products. And finally, we continue to invest in people-to-people ties, in education, culture, and professional exchanges, including between our judiciary, teachers, and civil servants. These important human connections give our relationship more depth and resilience. Of course, beyond our bilateral ties, our two countries also work together closely on the wider stage. Both countries believe in an open, rules-based international system, especially at a time when it is under strain. And as fellow founding members of the Future of Investment and Trade Partnership, we will push to keep trade open, rules clear, and supply chains dependable. I also welcome New Zealand's upgrading of its relations with ASEAN to a comprehensive strategic partnership. Next year, Singapore will chair ASEAN. New Zealand will chair the Pacific Islands Forum, and that gives us a good opportunity to bring our regions closer together and strengthen cooperation across a wider area. In these uncertain times, partnerships like this become even more important. We may be small countries, at least in terms of population, but we have agency. And when we work together with clarity, with purpose, and with trust, we can shape outcomes together, turn challenges into opportunities, and bring benefits to our people. So, Prime Minister Luxen, Chris, my good friend, thank you for the fruitful and excellent discussions today, and I wish you a very fruitful visit to Singapore. Thank you very much.
Well, firstly, thank you very much, Prime Minister Wong, give him a round of applause. Yeah, deserves that. He hasn't even got the guitar out yet. So, but no, listen, can I just say, Lawrence, thank you very much for your warm welcome, and thank you for all your delegation and the generosity that you've shown my delegation as well. It's great to be back in Singapore. Again, thank you so much for hosting Amanda and I last night. It was a wonderful evening. Just the four of us catching up was really appreciated. We've been looking forward to this visit for some time. I was very pleased to join Prime Minister Wong this morning to launch the Singapore-New Zealand Leadership Forum. And we're in an inflection point in global affairs at the moment. We're moving increasingly from a multilateral world that relied on rules to a multipolar world that relies on power. And for countries like Singapore and New Zealand, this is a really good time for us to come together, and our partnership really truly matters. There's no better illustration of the way that we are working together to buffer one another from the shocks that disruption to fuel supply chains have produced for open, trade-dependent nations like ours. It is reassuring for me and for all New Zealanders that we're taking very practical steps to strengthen the resilience of both of our countries by keeping open essential links while continuing to advance an agenda focused on growth. First, on resilience, around about a third of New Zealand's fuel is refined here in Singapore. So what happens here has a direct bearing on New Zealand's economic resilience and energy security. At the same time, New Zealand is a trusted supplier of food and other essential goods to Singapore. Fuel is also part of the food security story. The diesel that we receive from Singapore underpins the farming and the freight systems that keep New Zealand's food moving into the region. This is a relationship which both countries can rely on one another. We have each other's backs. And that is why today's signing of the Agreement on Trade and Essential Supplies is just so important. It takes a long-standing trust and it turns it into really practical action. A commitment to keep essential trade flowing in a crisis, and a commitment to give businesses, governments and the public confidence that trusted supply lines will remain open under huge pressure. Second, on growth and connectivity, Singapore is absolutely central to New Zealand's economic future. It is our top trading partner here in Southeast Asia, a major investor in New Zealand, and a key hub for many of our Kiwi firms connecting into the markets, capital and ideas across the region. This is a practical, complementary relationship. Singapore supports New Zealand's access to fuel, logistics and regional markets, while New Zealand contributes to Singapore's food security, innovation, advanced technology, green growth and wider resilience. And that is why the inaugural Singapore-New Zealand Leadership Forum between our respective business leaders really matters, because governments can set the conditions, but ultimately businesses create the growth. Third, on defence and security, as Lawrence alluded to, Singapore is one of our closest defence and security partners. We spent time talking about what more we can do today in our bilateral. Our relationship is built on decades of trust and consistency and shared interests. New Zealand Defence has been present in this region since the Second World War, and we were there to support Singapore way back from the first years of independence. When Singapore looked to partners and others decided to leave, New Zealand decided to stay, and we are still here today. And that enduring partnership supports regional stability. It underpins the wider relationship we now have in trade and connectivity and prosperity. And that's why I'm very much looking forward to visiting Changi Naval Base this afternoon as well. It's a reminder that this partnership is not just historic, it is active, it is practical, it is future focused, and it's important. So I think this is a relationship that has real substance, it has real history, it has real value to both countries. In a very volatile and uncertain world, New Zealand and Singapore are choosing to stay open, to stay connected and to work together. We are choosing to deepen and to broaden our relationship. And so, Prime Minister Wong, can I say again, thank you for the friendship, thank you for the partnership, and thank you for the excellent discussions we've had with our teams this morning. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Prime Ministers. We will now take questions from members of the media. May I ask that journalists identify yourselves before asking your question? So for the first question, may I invite Singapore's Lian He Zao Bao.
Hi, Siu Feng from Lian He Zao Bao. My question is for both Prime Ministers. It is on the agreement on trade in essential supplies. So how might this bilateral agreement benefit the wider region? And given the current supply chain uncertainties in the world, do both countries hope that this might serve as a pathfinder for similar bilateral agreements with other countries or even in multilateral settings? Thank you.
The agreement, first of all, is between our two countries and will benefit our two countries, making sure that there is assurance for critical supplies, especially in times of crisis and shortages. So that's a bilateral agreement. We hope, of course, that this new standard will be able to extend beyond our two countries. So we will welcome interest in other countries in the region coming on board. And just as New Zealand and Singapore had pioneered groundbreaking initiatives before, like the P4, and then eventually brought on board new countries and expanded these arrangements, I think we can do the same now for this agreement on trade in essential supplies. It is between us, but it's not exclusive. It's not meant to be exclusive. We welcome other countries to join us, and if they are able to meet the same standards, then it will start to expand a network of trusted partners who can provide similar assurances to one another.
Yes, fully support the Prime Minister, exactly what we discussed this morning, which is that here again we have Singapore and New Zealand inventing new trade architecture and conceiving of new ways to build partnership and relationship and deepen it up in the way that we have. So we're also very open to saying to other countries, if this is something of value to you and that you can meet the standard and are prepared to back each other and have each other's backs in the way that we've modelled that out, we would welcome that as well. So, but again, I think it's just fantastic that in the history of two countries like ours that are deeply aligned, have similar outlooks on the world, have similar set of values and interests, that actually we come together and we build out a new thing that hasn't happened before in a trade agreement and arrangements. And I think it obviously has benefit to both Singapore and to the New Zealand people. But again, if we can bring others into it in due course, absolutely open to doing so.
Thank you, Prime Ministers. Next question from the New Zealand, The Post.
Luke Malpass from the Post newspaper in Wellington. Primarily for you, Prime Minister Wong, but Prime Minister Luxen, feel free to weigh in after. If the Middle East conflict means that the Strait of Hormuz effectively remains closed for another few months, what are the crude supply challenges facing Singaporean refineries? How is the Singaporean government and firms planning to respond to this? And notwithstanding today's deal, how do you expect it, if you expect it at all, to impact any customers?
Sure.
Thank you.
In fact, our base case is that we would be prepared for a situation where supplies coming from the Strait of Hormuz remains limited for quite a prolonged period, at least till the end of the year, perhaps even beyond. Because even if the Strait of Hormuz were to be reopened very soon, there will still be hindrances to ships coming through. Energy and port infrastructure has been damaged, for example. Mines along the strait has to be cleared. And there is a matter of confidence to be restored, because ships coming through need to be assured that they will not get attacked by any stray drone, for example. Insurance needs to work effectively. And all these, we think, take months at least to restore. So we are working on the assumption that flows from the strait will be limited. There will be alternative supply routes, which is already happening now, for example, from the strait coming through the Red Sea. There will also be alternative supplies of crude from countries like America, which are trying to ramp up supply. But even with all these alternatives, there will be a residual supply gap. And we are bracing ourselves for that eventuality. Fortunately, because Singapore is an energy hub in some ways, all the leading energy companies are here, trading, storing, refining oil. They have good networks. They are plugged into many different networks. And so even with this residual gap that we are referring to, our refineries, for example, for now, are still able to source for alternate feedstock from other supplies and still able to maintain their production. Their throughput is lower than it used to be, but they are still able to continue with their production and to meet the needs of all their customers. And so that's the kind of information we have for now, and we're talking, we monitor this very closely, we are keeping track of it, and we are, with the agreement that we have between New Zealand and Singapore, we are not only assuring one another of supplies during this period, but we are also exchanging information, forward-looking indicators, so that both sides can be better prepared.
I think the only thing I'd add, Luke, is that we both want to see a de-escalation, we both want to see a ceasefire, and we both want to see a resolution of this conflict. And the Prime Minister and I talk regularly, and we're often on the same global forums together, making the same case to many of the other countries that we're on those calls with. For us, exactly as the Prime Minister said, even if a ceasefire and a resolution happened today, you've got at least 6 months of bumpiness just in terms of the lag effect of the supply chain and how it all hangs together. Just to reassure you, I did also meet this morning with the leaders of the different refineries and oil companies that are here, exactly as the Prime Minister talked to, and as we've been talking with them even back at home, they have been able to find alternative sources of crude. They've been very good at being able to ascertain that. Our key priority, of course, is to maintain supply. We appreciate as long as the market's functioning, there'll be a price effect to that, which we are all struggling with, but many countries around the region, around the world are as well. So, from all the assurances that we've had again today, we know it's going to be potentially bumpy, and that's why we're preparing for, in the way that we are with our 4-phased approach back at home. But importantly for now, we don't see a risk to any of that supply based off the conversations we had this morning and what we see going into the next few months.
Thank you, Prime Ministers. Next question from Singapore, CNA TV.
Hi, good afternoon, Prime Ministers. Aslam here from CNA. So, Prime Minister Wong, you mentioned about collaboration beyond just 2 countries, also with the ASEAN region in your speech earlier. Tell us more about what are the opportunities, especially with the ASEAN summit coming up, and also with Singapore chairing ASEAN next year. What are the opportunities for the bloc and New Zealand that you both see? And also perhaps you could highlight a very important quality between for each other's countries that makes this world's first agreement possible. what was it that led to the breakthrough in the agreement?
Yeah.
Thank you.
On the opportunities for New Zealand and Singapore to do more together in ASEAN, I think there are many opportunities. First of all, within ASEAN itself, we are continuing to advance our plans to integrate our economies and have a more seamless flow of goods and services so that companies operating in ASEAN can really maximize the advantages of each individual ASEAN economy and operate seamlessly. And as ASEAN does this better, obviously we would like to invite more New Zealand companies thinking about expanding into Southeast Asia to make full use of the opportunities in ASEAN. Think of ASEAN, not just come to Singapore, but think of ASEAN as an entire market where they can integrate their operations and effectively maximize their networks in the region. Second, ASEAN is also a growing consumer market because ASEAN has a relatively young population with a rising middle class. So beyond integrated production, New Zealand companies that are looking for new customers can expand into ASEAN. And then thirdly, because ASEAN is also integrating, I think there will be new opportunities for investments. For example, in the ASEAN power grid, new opportunities in additional infrastructure, which again, we can benefit from external investors and partners with expertise, and certainly New Zealand is one of them with expertise in areas like green energy. So these are all new opportunities, I believe, that ASEAN offers to New Zealand companies and which Singapore can play a role by partnering with New Zealand companies to get them to do more, not just in Singapore, but also in the wider region. On what's special between our two countries, I would say two things. Number one, there's something about a small and open economy.
Yeah.
You look at the world in a certain way, and because we are both small, open economies, we have a very similar strategic perspective. And that makes it easier to cooperate. But two, we have developed, as I said in my remarks earlier, a very deep reservoir of trust, working together, collaborating, pioneering new initiatives, overcoming and tackling crisis after crisis, like what happened during COVID. And these two factors, I think, the fact that we are both small, open, with a shared strategic perspective, and the fact that we are trusted partners, enable us to do more things together, including the agreement that we just signed just now.
Yeah, and I think for ASEAN is a huge opportunity for New Zealand. We obviously upgraded last year to a comprehensive strategic partnership in Kuala Lumpur. If you think about the ASEAN economies, it's one of the major growth engines of the world in terms of what that power and that represents economically. So for a lot of New Zealand companies, they already have their hubs here in Singapore. For many more of them, they want to be able to access the region through Singapore. It's the logical place where there's familiarity and where there's an understanding of how it all works. I think on the exactly as to why we work well together, we've worked. The Prime Minister and I got to know each other before he became Prime Minister and actually before I became Prime Minister. And there's a high level of personal trust and chemistry between the two of us. But it's been really exciting to see our respective ministers building rapport and relationship with each other as well. And again, today is a new evolution. We want our business leaders to build that relationship with each other as well. And we want to deepen this relationship, broaden it out even further. But it comes from essentially 60 years of trust, of doing things with a similar set of values, similar view of the world. We find always our conversations with Singapore, so we get to the point really quickly. We have very similar outlook, and we can get on to actually what are we going to do, what's the action that comes from those conversations. So there's just a natural affinity and huge respect and huge trust.
Thank you, Prime Minister. And the last question from New Zealand, TVNZ.
Hello, I'm May Heron from Television New Zealand. It's a question for both of you and kind of follows on from what you were saying about the relationship. You talk about this relationship deepening. How far can it go? What areas are you targeting? And in terms of businesses, what is their role in this and how can your governments help the businesses to develop this relationship?
Yep.
Well, I think we are building from a very strong position of partnership today. As to how far more we can go, the sky is the limit, frankly. I mean, it's only limited by our level of ambition, and if we are ambitious enough and we continue to look at new ways of collaborating across the 6 pillars of our comprehensive strategic partnership, I think we will continue to break new ground. We are doing something now, groundbreaking on supply chains, but on defense, on security, on the green economy, on the digital economy where we talked about deploying AI, there will be many potential new areas for collaboration. And certainly businesses have a very important part to play. On the government side, as Prime Minister Luxen said just now, amongst the leaders, we have a good rapport and relationship. The ministers get together, the civil servants do. The military personnel have very good interactions. We want to have that same rapport and relationship amongst our business leaders. I think there's more to be done there. And as they build these very strong people-to-people connections, I think organically from the ground up, new ideas will evolve too. So it's not just top-down, but ground-up ideas will come up. And both governments, both Prime Minister Luxen and I, look forward to hearing from the business forum later what new ideas they have that will bring our 2 economies closer together. And both governments will surely be committed to providing our full support.
Yeah, the thing I would add is that, there's no doubt about it, we're in a real inflection point in terms of geopolitics and the world order that we're facing. And we've been here before. If you think about the 20th century, there have been moments in time that have been inflection points as well. And, as I said, we're moving from multilateral to multipolar, but it isn't yet fully defined and fully determined. And actually, for countries like us, actually, by doing and modelling out the agreement that we've just signed today as a world first, is actually a good example of actually how we can model out, and remake the case for multilateralism in the way that we want to as well. So, I think we've got a task to do in the way that we work together at international forums that we're often both together at. We're very much on the same page. We're both making the case for remaking the case for multilateralism. And I think with respect to the future, that as a result, that crisis of a changing world order is actually, is an opportunity actually for us to step forward and to be even bolder and braver in the things that we can do together and create together. And so, that I agree with the Prime Minister, the sky is the limit. There's lots of things that we can do. We've got opportunities in deepening up more of what we want to do together in defence. As you know, back at home, we've got a huge investment, $12 billion going into our defence forces in the next 4 years. What we don't want to see around the world is just lots of inflation in the defence industry. It's actually how do we make sure that that spend works well and that we are interoperable and close with partners like Singapore. And I think, as you've seen in trade, we keep pushing the boundaries and pioneering new mechanics and new architecture that actually could be beneficial to the whole of the world. So, it's, I think both countries have a fantastic future, and there's no, as difficult and as choppy as the waters are out there in the globe at the moment, and I appreciate that people feel anxious about that change that is happening right now. It hasn't yet been determined, and I think countries like New Zealand and Singapore, while we're small, are really important. We have values and interests. We may not have power, but the way we have power and influence is by working together in the way that you've seen us increasingly do so. So, so I think, there's a lot of opportunity out there, and it's a pretty exciting future for both countries as we think about how to navigate that together.
With that, thank you. Thank you, Prime Ministers, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. We have come to the end of the joint press conference. May I invite the 2 Prime Ministers for a final photo? Thank you, everyone. Prime Ministers will take their leave. May I request that you remain seated while they do so?